Andy, let's go into it a little bit. And you talked, Scott Stricklin was mentioned in the article as well. And there was a quote in there, he said, since we won our last national championship, we've had years where we've had some good success, high level success. And he goes on to say, we've had incredibly erratic with some incomprehensible lows that you wouldn't expect at the University of Florida. So, Andy, there's been 4-win seasons. There's been 6-win seasons, losses to Georgia Southern, Vanderbilt last year, Muschamp, McElwain, Mullen, now Napier. Are those incomprehensible lows more than just win-loss record for Scott Stricklin?
I just think he's trying to find a way off that roller coaster, and it's really hard to do. It's hard to be what Georgia is right now, what Alabama has been, what Florida was. And the question I think they're wrestling with right now is this something that Florida can do on a regular basis? Can they have that sort of success on a regular basis? Or was it a result of having two legendary Hall of Fame coaches? Because Steve Spurrier and Urban Meyer don't come along all that often. So, can you be successful all the time? Like, I'll give an example. Ohio State is always good. Look in their history. Find a down period. There isn't one. Oklahoma is almost always good. Other than mid to late 90s, Oklahoma, through its history, has always been good. Florida hadn't been like that. Texas hasn't been like that. USC hasn't been like that. Alabama hasn't been like. Georgia hasn't been like that. It's not that easy to do. And so what Stricklin would like to do is get Florida to a place where it can be consistently in the playoff hunt, in the national title picture. And with 12-team playoff coming in, I think that's a reasonable goal. Winning the national title as much as Florida did 3 times in 18 years, well, actually 3 times in 12 years, that's probably not a reasonable goal. We've seen it happen with Alabama, and I think we're going to see Georgia win 3 in probably that time span or more compressed time span. But it's not normal. It's not something you should expect. What you should expect is to try to be something like Ohio State has been, something like Oklahoma has been, where you are good every year and a lot of years you're great. And that's what they want to be, but they're not there yet. And the roster that they had when they fired Dan Mullen was not going to get them there. So they hire Billy Napier, who, according to basically every coach you talk to, they will say, other than Kirby, Billy will follow the Nick Saban process more closely than anyone. He understands what works and what doesn't. A lot of the folks who get hired after they've worked for Nick Saban say, I took everything. I know exactly how he does it. But then they don't want to do the things that Nick Saban does that are unpleasant. Like, Nick Saban is the lead recruiter on Alabama's top 10 recruits every year. Nick Saban has the same recruiting meeting every week at the same time. His calendar is filled out 18 months in advance. It is not a particularly fun life being Nick Saban, but it works. Kirby does that. Billy Napier does that too. The question is, can Billy Napier do it as well as Kirby Smart or Nick Saban? And we don't know that yet. Well, here's Billy Napier. He's got, a $31.8 million buyout after this season? They ain't firing Billy Napier. It doesn't matter how bad they are. So he's got a chance to actually do this the way he wants to. It's up to him to figure out if that's going to work or not. And if it does, then they could potentially land on that consistency that they're looking for.
Part of this, Scott Stricklin, there's a lot on his shoulders, I think, with this. And I think you said the patience might be kind of forced. It might be kind of forced from his angle too, because is he really going to get a chance to hire a third football coach?
Yeah.
If it doesn't work out with Billy Napier. So my thing is, he's going to be as patient as possible because he needs this to work out. And you hope that doesn't dig the hole even deeper for Florida, because he has to hang on to Billy Napier.
Well, and that's the gamble. Now, if the season's bad, they're not going to fire Billy Napier. If the fan base, or more importantly, the influential donor base, if they decide they want some blood for this season, if it's bad, then I think Scott Stricklin understands that. I think he understands the position he's in, and that if things aren't going well because the cost is so high to fire Billy Napier, they're going to turn and look at him if they're not happy. But again, if the arrow is pointing up, if things look like they could get better in the future, then he's going to be okay. And he can just keep saying, just be patient, just be patient, just be patient. But if it looks bad, yeah, they're going to make sure he doesn't hire the next person if they think ultimately that Billy's not going to work out.
Andy, a big question. I did have this sent to me a little bit too with this, and going back to your article and some things that came out from it. Is there dedication from all the parties involved at Florida to get this fixed, to get this better? Now, we see the new facility, but it took time. We saw the issues with NIL, but it took time. And we know, like, if we go back earlier, Stricklin's job's tied to Napier. So, where can it get better? Where does it need to get better for Florida to find that consistency?
Oh, I think from a spending standpoint and a dedication of resources standpoint, they're where they need to be. They're finally where they need to be. It took them a long time to get there, but they're there, and there are no excuses on that end. Like, if this doesn't work out, they cannot make the excuse. Like, the coaching staff can't make the excuse that we didn't get enough resources. They got the resources this time. But the NIL stuff needed to get ironed out, which I do think they have it ironed out now. I think the organization they created, the Florida Victorious, that looks like the organizations that are working in NIL, and it's basically a fundraising arm, and that's what it has to be. So I think they've got that part figured out. It seems like one hand knows what the other is doing, that was the problem with the Jaden Rashada thing.
Thank you.
And there was a lot of it wasn't miscommunication. It was kind of non-communication that caused that. And so I think they have all that part ironed out. The question is, really boils down to the basics. It was what we were just talking about. Can Billy Napier and his staff beat the Georgias and the Ohio States and the Alabamas for players and build a good enough roster to compete with them? That's it. That's what it boils down to now, because they have the resources, they have the facilities. The NIL thing seems to be, fixed might not be the right word, because we don't know. They just got this organization in place, but it seems to be the right type of organization to make it work. So now they've just got to do it. That's the big question. And we won't know until we see who signs in December. We won't know until we see what the roster looks like going into the 2024 season. I know nobody wants to hear that. I know nobody wants to hear that this season probably isn't going to end in a championship of any kind. That this season, if they win 7 games, they're probably doing all right. Nobody wants to hear that, but that's kind of where they're at.
Yeah, reality of the situation falls into place here. Like, we know this is not where it needs to be and where many want it to be, but let's just face the reality here for a second. And as you said, be patient. There's no choice but to be patient right now.
Exactly.
and see where it goes.